installment of the Centurus Education Series. Today we are going to be focusing on Tableau dashboard design best practices. So let's get started with our agenda for today. I'm going to start by introducing the presenters, provide a quick overview of Centurus for those of you new to our webinar series here, and then we're going to jump into the meat of things. Mike Weinhauer will be walking you through 10 of the better practices for Tableau dashboard design today with some great examples from the trenches. We have some great offers and additional resources related to today's topic, and then finally we'll finish with a Q&A session. We really encourage, we like these sessions to be interactive. We want you to use the chat or the question pane to send us questions. We have a panel of folks. We'll try to answer them as we go along, but then we'll also address any we don't get to in the Q&A session. So my name is Jim Frazier. I'm the Vice President of Client Solutions here at Centurus. I've been in the software and professional services industry for over 24 years, and I have a fantastic job. I get to connect our prospects and clients with the talented, very seasoned resources in our organization to provide them with analytics solutions. I'm joined today by Mike Weinhauer, who is our Tableau Practice Director. Mike has also spent 20+ years in this industry working for Oracle, IBM, and SAP in a number of different roles. Mike spends a great deal of his time these days helping our clients determine the best way to deploy Tableau in their environments, which makes him the perfect guy to present on today's topic. So who is Centurus? We're a nationwide business analytics consulting firm, first and foremost. And in your organization, if your organization is like most that we run into these days, you want a holistic view of your business, but you're struggling to integrate information across different business and unit functions and units, and you know you're maybe pulling planning data together with actuals data from your GL. You may be pulling sales data together with forecast data from another application. That's the area that we play in. Most likely your analysts are spending a lot of time in what we call doing Excel heroism, trying to pull this data across those different business units and applications, doing a lot of that work manually with Excel. And we bridge the gap between the data and the great decision making. We architect solutions that give you access to reliable data across the organization so you can quickly and easily get answers to support your strategic goals. So over the years we've realized that to be successful at that, you have to field a project team that includes a solution architect who's worked in the business side of things, and then pair them with technical experts. So we've worked across thousands of projects. We've worked with almost every data source you can imagine. We know many of the front-end, back-end technologies, and we understand the pros and cons of those tools. We like to take a pragmatic approach, developing solutions that focus on the business needs while leveraging investments that our clients have made in technology already. We architect the solutions that meet your immediate needs and then can easily adapt as your business changes and grows. This is a little slide, just a representative slide of some of our clients. It gives you a good idea of the range of industries we've worked in. We've delivered thousands of successful projects for hundreds of clients, from the Fortune 500 to the mid-market. We've solved business problems across many industries and functional areas, including the Office of Finance, Sales and Marketing, Manufacturing, Operations, HR and IT, and even built customer-facing or outward-facing analytics solutions for some of our clients. If you need someone to help with your next analytics project, we'd love the opportunity to leverage our experience for you. We like to start things off with a poll so we can get a little bit of a gauge on the audience, and I know the audience appreciates the feedback when we share it with you as well. So today we'd like to just ask you, what are the biggest challenges you have around developing effective dashboards? with Tableau. And this is you can actually answer yes to multiple of these. It's not just one answer. So if you can select those that are most pertinent, and then we'll provide the results back so that everyone can see them. Mike, can you turn those results around so we can see them? And there they are. So it looks like having the data prepared and staged properly, which we would guess, because that's what we hear quite often is the largest. Obviously, understanding the kind of the business side of things that are driving it is a big issue. The skill set with Tableau, those are all areas that we can definitely help in with our education. We'll talk about that and training offerings. And then securing and distributing the workbooks, I think we're going to touch on some of those today. So that's great. Hopefully that's been useful to the audience as well, to see where people are running into issues. So with that, I'd like to hand things over to Mike Weinhauer, our Tableau Practice Director, to talk about those better practices. Mike?
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for that great lead in there, and welcome everybody to the presentation. I'm pretty excited about this because this is, those of you who are aficionados of the Centurus webinar series may recall we did this presentation about a year and a half ago with our Zen Master, our illustrious Zen Master, Chuck Hooper. So now I've got big shoes to fill here, and I've sort of amalgamated this with another set of big shoes to fill, our founder and CEO John Peterson's information dashboard design science and whatnot, because I think while this focuses on Tableau, there's some really important foundational information that I've culled from that presentation, as well as from my own personal experience and that of our consultants. So without further ado then, let's take a look at our agenda specifically here. We'll focus on 10, and Jim already alluded to it, better practices for Tableau dashboard design. More on that in a minute. We'll talk about how you could design a dashboard with a goal in mind, how the overall dashboard layout impacts effectiveness, how to design for best performance, which chart types work best for specific goals, how to use color effectively, how to use text most effectively, how to minimize dashboard objects while maximizing your actionable insights, when to use any of the 3 basic times of navigation, some things you should really almost never do, some fundamental guiding principles for all dashboards, and then we'll try to pull it all together. So we talk about best practices versus better or good, and people are very quick to come out with, say, this is a best practice, this and that is a best practice. Well, we hesitate to say that because really I'd prefer to call them better or good practices, because really at the end of the day, the best dashboard, I'm fond of saying, is the one that yields actionable insights and gets adopted by your end users. BI projects historically have abysmal adoption rates, somewhere around the area of 25% if you listen to analysts. And we'll talk more about actionable insights. Can you actually get into that data? Can you see a trend? Can you see an opportunity, an anomaly? And then can you drill down into that and actually take action on that? Or do you have to go log into 3 different systems? So the best one, and you'll hear me repeat this over and over, hopefully you'll be walking away from this probably kind of mumbling it and repeating it in your head, that the best dashboard is the one that gives you actionable insights and actually gets used by your users, the one that they need every day to do their job. So first of all, let's start with some what I call interesting dashboards. And to be fair, some of these dashboards are fairly long in the tooth. They come from some 90s technologies, but they're frequently highlighted by dashboard visionaries and gurus like Stephen Few and whatnot. And this one's harkens from my days back at Cognos, good old Cognos Visualizer, and it has a lot of big no-nos in it. You've wasted a lot of real estate in here with labels and graphics up at the top. Screen real estate is always at a premium in dashboards, and then of course a whole bunch of 3D pie charts, and we'll talk a little bit about why 3D is a problem and why pie charts are generally a no-no. So this one's kind of an interesting one. Here's one that was made in Brio/Hyperion. It's got a whole bunch of stuff going on, a lot of 3D pie charts, 3D bar charts. Not really very interactive, and again, it's kind of a lot of stuff going on and a lot of potentially wasted real estate. And then there's this one, which is built in Microsoft, and it's just a panoply of no here with some crazy radar charts and 3D pie charts and just so much stuff going on here. So what do these all have in common? You know, really, woof is right. You know, just they make your head hurt. There's too much going on there, and generally speaking, those would be largely unusable dashboards. So let's talk about what makes a better dashboard. So the good old KISS rule always, generally, and still applies here. Keep it simple, silly, or something more colorful if you prefer. I like to refer to these quotes. The painting isn't done when I can't get anything else in, but rather when I can't take anything else out. And I couldn't figure out who to attribute that to, so who knows? But it's a great reminder. And Blaise Pascal definitely said this. He said, "I've only made this letter longer because I have not had the time to make it shorter." In other words, making things simple and concise is hard. It's very hard. If you look at Mozart's music, a lot of Mozart's music looks very simple on the page, but mastering it, he's one of the hardest ones to master, and there's great beauty in simplicity. So you need to take pains to make things simple. Now the challenge with that is that Tableau's great strength is also, and by extension possibly your greatest weakness. It's very easy to overcomplicate and make things very cumbersome. So I'd like to encourage you to use what we call the 5-second rule, where you should be able to put a dashboard in front of a user or yourself, and within 5 seconds you should be able to ascertain what that dashboard is trying to convey to you. You should also be able to introduce the dashboard to end users largely unscripted. In other words, as you're developing or when you release a dashboard, you shouldn't have to sit down with the user and provide them with a 25-page manual or give them a half-an-hour tutorial on it. You should be able to throw it in front of them, and the dashboard should have enough cues and be simple and intuitive enough where the users start using it and go into the right places and are able to answer the questions that they would want to ask of that dashboard. More on that later. To that end, these tools, particularly Tableau, allow you to experiment and iterate rapidly with the end users. The with is critical there. You can literally sit in the room and connect to data and prototype with your end users. So you know, steer away from the, you go away for a week and huck it over the fence and get some feedback from them, and it takes these lengthy lengthy cycles. Do it right there, and you can do that quickly. So let's take a look at some dashboards that are a little easier on the eyes. And this one is I'm a big fan of. This is off public.tableau.com, and I'm actually going to toggle over to this dashboard live. And because A, it's about roller coasters, which I love, and B, I think it's just a very elegant, simple, but very informative dashboard. It doesn't waste a lot of real estate with the logo, but the logo has a cool roller coaster-y looking font. It's got a picture of a roller coaster. And then it starts out, and my driver's in the top. It's interactive. It talks about the fastest roller coasters. However, I can change the entire focus of the dashboard with these very cool interactive prompts and filters. I can go by height, I can go by the number of inversions, I can go by length, and you'll notice that the dashboard changes. It ranks them by top 10, and as I hover over those, it shows where it is in the world. Likewise, if I hover over where a park is in the world, it will highlight the roller coaster, and if I pick a given roller coaster, it will change to the YouTube video with a point of view video showing the specs for that particular roller coaster. It's a fantastic dashboard that does a lot and really makes great use of its effective real estate. Okay, so now let's go back. Another great example here. This is one using the sample superstore metrics. We build a lot of these in our workshops, and they end up coming out given time. They're sort of limited in their visual appeal, and we're only able to apply some better best practices. But this one's a nice version of the superstore metrics where, from a retail perspective, if I'm a manager, I am always interested in these top 6 metrics here. I've got my customers at a glance, my orders, my profitability, my sales, as well as directional information, trends. I've got some ratios. I've got some averages. I've got a great use of heat maps. And again, oops, sorry, I thought this was the real dashboard. I'm going to jump over. Oh, I don't have a screenshot of that. My bad. I can click on these regions and that will reshape the map and change my top 10 customers. There's a lot of information presented in here. There isn't a lot of wasted real estate, and the color palettes are nice. They're colorblind friendly. There's guidance in the dashboard that tells me what to do, so I don't need a whole lot of training in this thing. It's just a really nice looking dashboard. And here's another example of that too, where again I've got very clean and consistent use of fonts and colors. I've got variances, which are very useful. I've got nice at-a-glance metrics, and again, this is a fully interactive dashboard. And then lastly, I show this one off. This is one created by Centurus' own Kyle Bealey that is really cool. It's another one on public.tableau.com, which I encourage you to go visit and create a profile in, where you're able to look at musical artists. So I've got Leonard Cohen chosen here, and John Lennon, and Keith Richards, Stevie Wonder, the late Prince, and actually the late Leonard Cohen as well, combined with Beck, and you're able to look at the ratings by their age decade for their albums, and as you select these artists, it aligns them, and you can compare them and see what decades they had hits and where their albums and how popular they were. And it's very interactive and makes excellent use of the screen real estate, as well as uses a really nice custom image palette here to draw the lines here. So it's a really nice use of an effective and aesthetically pleasing dashboard. So don't give your users headaches. Give them, if I can extend and stretch my metaphors a little bit, give them the visual equivalent of hot dogs or visual belly rubs. Cardinal rule here, visualizations, by definition, visual is the core of that word. They should be visual. I can't tell you how many customers we go into, how many clients we go visit, where the first thing they want to do is they want to replicate their Excel spreadsheets. You didn't buy a visualization tool to create Excel spreadsheets that most people aren't happy with, and they have all the attendant problems of Excel with anyway. Don't replicate Excel. Challenge yourself. Make them visual. Why is that important? Well, pre-attentive visual capabilities, which I'll drill into in a minute, are a big part of what propelled you to the top of the food chain. Now, I don't know if any of you do a lot of presenting. You'd be surprised at how much time it takes to find images. And I was really just looking for an image with humans at the top of the food chain, but apparently we're only about halfway to the top of the food chain underneath zombies, aliens, and of course zombie aliens. So the point is, though, that as far as beyond zombies and non-earthly creatures, we are technically at the top of the food chain, and that is largely as a result of your what are called pre-attentive visual capabilities and your enlarged cerebral cortex. Well, why is that important? Well, because it helped keeping you from being eaten by T-Rexes and saber-toothed tigers and allowed you to reproduce and populate the earth. Only to die playing Pokemon Go, but that's a whole different topic. So pre-attentive attributes, what does that mean? Well, the eyes basically have it. When your eyes are open, your vision accounts for 2/3 of the electrical activity of the brain, a full 2 billion of the 3 billion firings per second, and half of your neural tissue is directly or indirectly related to vision. Furthermore, more of your neurons are dedicated to vision than the other 4 senses combined, and your sense of smell is losing ground to the visual cortex at a fairly rapid rate. So in other words, the eyes have it. In terms of what pre-attentive attributes are, in other words, your eyes will detect things like orientation and line length, line width, size, shape, curvature, etc., as well as color intensity and hue and spatial position. All of these are pre-attentive visual attributes that your brain will process before the vision centers will process before passing to the memory centers and more complex processing centers of the brain. In other words, it's very, very fast and helped you from getting eaten by T-Rexes and saber-toothed tigers. So use those, right? So I always challenge folks when they come into, as clients, they come into our workshops, they come into our classes. Visualization is very much half art and half science, or part art, part science. And I challenge you, most of you are used to using the left side of your brain with your Excel spreadsheets and your databases. Use both sides. Challenge that artistic part of your brain and use those visual pre-attentive capabilities in your dashboards. All right, so that's a little background on why visualization is important, some bad examples, some better examples. Let's get into the specifics around Tableau and some of Tableau's strengths in particular with dashboarding. So let's talk about first how you design a dashboard with a goal in mind. So any good dashboard should start with the goal is obviously actionable insights. And what do I mean by that? You should be able to, again, see an opportunity, an anomaly, something like that, and then be able to drill into that and take action on it, right? You should be able to get down to an order or something, a case, a diagnosis, a claim that you can actually take action on. And in this particular dashboard, I have a sales and profit summary by state. And I sort of see my profit and sales along these lines. And then I have another sales and profit summary by product. And I can sort of pick my state, but it doesn't go anywhere. It's not related to this, to my products. It doesn't allow me to really answer many questions. It creates more questions than it answers. So a better design is a dashboard perhaps like this, where I have some instructions here that say click a bar to see the detail. I've combined some nice dimensionality in here as well as some drill capabilities. You know, Tableau, those of you who have used it, you should know that Tableau has great drill capabilities. It's very easy. It automatically creates hierarchies for dates. It's very easy to create geographic and other hierarchies, unrelated drill paths, so I can go from a product to a region. However you want to kind of navigate your data. It's combined in a single visualization that that is quick and quickly draws my eyes to my big red bar and my solid green bar. Notice the absence of labels. I'm using my pre-attentive visual attributes to where I'm immediately drawn to this red one. I love tooltips. I'm a big fan of tooltips. I can get to the data, and oh, by the way, I can click on this, and then the dashboard goes and it queries a much more detailed set of records. Now, it's fine to get to textual records ultimately if this is your actionable insight, but that's the secondary or tertiary or whatever. That's your end game. So this drives this. This answers more questions than it creates, hopefully, for your end users. So this is a better example. You should always start with the goal is actionable insights. What are the questions? What decisions get made? Use leading versus lagging indicators, provide some context, use ratios, variances, things of that nature. So always start from that question. In our poll, we had 47% of people saying that was a biggest challenge around your Tableau dashboard, understanding the business problem being answered. So it's hard to build good analytics if you don't know what the dashboard, what questions the dashboard is supposed to answer for you. All right, so number two, how does the overall dashboard layout impact its effectiveness? Well, first I'll show you a bad example, or a not great example. Here it says the driver is to click a bar to change the other charts. My first question I'm interested in answering in this dashboard, apparently, is what are my sales and profitability by the product containers across my regions? And if I click on one of these, it's a good dashboard in the sense that I do have a driver, and hopefully this is one of my questions, and it's interactive. Tableau makes this interactivity really easy to do, by the way. It's extraordinarily simple, so use it. The problem is that layout is very critical in dashboards. We in the West here, we read from the top down and from left to right. So your driver should go in the upper left-hand corner. Your most important screen real estate in dashboards typically is going to be your upper left-hand corner. So a better example of that is putting that driver widget, that driver worksheet here in your upper left-hand corner, where again I can interact with it, and then I go look at the secondary or tertiary analytics that are associated with that. All right, so consider your layout. And many of these are very simplistic examples meant to highlight the concept. Again, your mileage may vary, and the best dashboard is the one that gives you actionable insights and gets adopted by your end users. All right, 3, performance, performance, performance. You'll hear me talk a lot about that today. Performance is something you always have to consider. And with Tableau, there are a couple things that you definitely want to keep in mind. Today's users have the expectation of Apple iPhone app and Google response times, right? Sub-second, 1 second, 3 seconds. You got about 5-6 seconds, and then people are starting to look at their watches, and they're getting annoyed, and they're starting to walk away. You want to be very intelligent about this. In this particular dashboard, and again, the number of objects in your dashboard will typically equate to the number of queries that exist in, or that are going to have to happen to render this dashboard. So in this particular case, we advise that you start with a top level, your driver, where I'm looking at my customer segment and my region and my profitability. This is only 16 records, right? It's aggregated to a very high level. And what my dashboard allows me to do is, you'll notice I keep these blank, and I use actions, Tableau actions, to click on an area that I'm interested in. It then drills down to the next level. It breaks my region down into my state, and this queries about 200 records. And then I can pick a given state, and I go down to my detail records, which are at about 35,000 records. Now, at 35,000 records, you're not too concerned about performance, I would imagine. But again, if you sort of go to web scale and factor that up to real-world volumes, the point is this data set should be a summarized, much smaller set. Maybe it's an extract. Maybe it's a summary table. And then it drives perhaps another summary table or a different extract, and then maybe you're doing live queries here. This also works for personally identifiable information and isolating HIPAA and whatnot information. You can hide where you don't have that information. You can have that in extracts, and then have the HIPAA information or the PII information highly secured in your database, where the user's login restricts the records that come back and things of that nature. This is something that Centurus in particular is very expert at, and we've helped a lot of customers with that, is that data source optimization. The number one poll item was properly prepared data, with a full 2/3 of you saying that that's a problem. This is critical. You need to make sure you have a properly designed database that properly leverages or optimally leverages things like indexes, and in columnar stores distribution keys, and depending on your vendor, things like zone maps. The whole key is partition elimination and ultimately reduced disk I/O or utilization of in-memory technologies, right? You want to push these queries to the database, and you want to avoid over-reliance on blending. A lot of Tableau folks really go kind of overboard with blending, and that tends to cause performance problems, and it has its risks and challenges. Tableau 10 has some great improvements around blending is greatly enhanced. They now have data federation, which ameliorates some of those problems, but you still want to be very mindful of this, as performance, as I'm sure you all know, is probably arguably the number one key driver to success and adoption. Okay, so chart types. Which chart types work best for specific goals? There's a wealth of information out there on that. We have information on our resource sites. Tableau has white papers on this, so this will be kind of a quick overview of that. Bar charts, very good for categorical comparison. So here I'm looking at my sales across my different segments, across my different regions, and it's very easy for me to look and see how corporate compares across my different regions, how corporate compares to my other segments. It's great for doing categorical comparisons. Line charts, on the other hand, are excellent for showing data over time. They really show nice trending information, and Tableau makes this really easy. I can click on a line if I want to focus on office supplies. If I want to compare office supplies to furniture, I can control-click this. There's a lot of great stuff here, and I just click anywhere else off the line to show all three of them together, and it does a really nice job of showing kind of how that data trends over time. And then scatter plots, great for comparing measures. So I have my good old sales and profit correlation here. So when I'm looking at that, the Tableau has part of their secret sauce is their marks card. So when you're creating marks on your worksheet, you create marks that use size and color and shape and path and labels and text and whatnot. And these scatter plots, this one does a nice job of leveraging shapes as well as colors to, again, leverage those pre-attentive visual attributes, draw my attention to outliers. Again, note the absence of a lot of labels. When I hover over it, I can get to this, I can drill in on this. Tableau 10 even introduces a nice data highlighter that allows me to maintain my context while looking for information in a densely packed scatter plot. So that's really nice. So use these different measures using position, color, and shape. And I would argue that you could even enhance this thing. Tableau has some great built-in trend line capabilities. Scatter plots, imagine a more densely packed scatter plot. I can very quickly and easily add trend lines to this particular presentation right in the flow here and see, do that regression line, that linear regression line by default that shows how my trend lines actually show up on the line. So that's a nice little feature of Tableau that I think you could use to actually even enhance this particular scatter plot. So scatter plots, very useful for comparing different measures. Maps, Tableau does a great job with geospatial, i.e. mapping. Use them, right? And not only use them, but leverage things like their built-in demographics. So did you know that when you're creating a map, this is your standard kind of, those of you who've played with the sample data, it's a sales and profitability map. I'm not sure if I would have used the red in the design because red for profitability generally means bad, but in this case it was used to sort of highlight it and make it stand out from the underlying demographic information that has been overlaid here. Tableau provides a whole bunch of demographic information and census information that you can just drop in via the map layers. And what this gives me is a whole new richness to my analysis, and perhaps my unprofitable areas might be sitting around areas with lower income where people are more price sensitive. Conversely, my higher profit areas might be in areas where there's more wealth and people are less price sensitive. So use that. It's a great way to look at information. And if you're like me, kind of a map nerd, I just like using those things anyway. So take advantage of those things. And then the last chart type that I show you here is a bullet chart. And these are fantastic for looking at several different like values. In this example, your previous year's sales versus the new year quota. The blue bar represents the sales dollars, and the black line equals the next year's, the new year's quota dollars. And then these nice gray bar reference lines represent the 60 and 80% marks. So using Tableau's bullet chart capabilities, I'm able to look at four different measures and do some nice comparisons here visually. Where I can see, you know, in Arizona I'm looking great. I'm going to have a little more of a struggle here in Washington. Again, note the lack of the absence of a lot of labels, the use of gray shading and these reference lines to really give me a really nice visual here. So those are great ones. Now, there's a whole host of other visualizations out there, literally dozens. And again, the best one, don't be afraid to use the Show Me box in Tableau that allows you to quickly switch between different types of visualizations. You may, the conventional wisdom around a particular chart type may not apply. If a bubble chart gives you the insight that you're looking for and it's the one your users are clamoring for, give it to them, right? I'll add to that if they're demanding a bubble chart, which is a very questionable visualization by most folks, you might consider creating that and creating a more recommended visualization, and then showing them, giving them the option. And you might find that while they have an idea of what they want, they might find the other one more effective. But try again to be flexible and see which one kind of gives you the better insights and gets adopted. All right, now let's talk about using color types effectively. So Tableau does a lot of this stuff for you too. So the first one here in my dashboard, the sequential or gradient colors show scale. So this is looking at my sales. It's both by size and color across my product subcategories. Now what Tableau does, and this is a really neat feature, they are, Tableau, when I drag sales to color, Tableau automatically looks at my grouping level. It says, okay, you want your sales by across your subcategories. The minimum is 90,148. The maximum is at shares is at 969,760. The minimum is a positive number. The black is the maximum is a more positive number. So I put it on this kind of divergent blue, all blue scale. Now that is separate and distinct, or diametrically opposed to profit here, where we're looking at profit by subcategory by region, in which case, based upon this grouping, when I dragged profit to color, Tableau said, oh, okay, well the minimum one is good old tables in central, and it's at negative 16,560. The maximum is office machines in the south at topping out at 81,067. It then says, oh, that's a negative number, so it uses a red-green divergent color spectrum. And of course, you can flip it if negative profit is good, and you can do all kinds of stuff. Tableau 9 would use this red-green color palette. What are 8% of males? They are colorblind. So use this judiciously and be sensitive to that almost a full 10% of the population wouldn't be able to see this chart. Tableau 10 changed its default color palettes, and they use kind of an orange-blue, which is more colorblind friendly, but we have it in here, be kind to your colorblind friends, and again, always consider your audience. Then the last one here is sort of for categorical pieces of information, right, for categorical dimensions, like car colors here. You can align your color palette, black to black, red to red. Seems like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how few people actually do that. They just sort of go with the default. Tableau doesn't do this intelligently, but it's really easy to go in and then you can assign a palette, and your dashboard will be that much more engaging and obvious. Okay, so that's color. And then I meant to put a slide in here about color, but contrast is very important, and you want to be very careful with that. And Tableau takes pains to make the interface kind of fade into the background so that you focus on the visualization, and they try to move away from and avoid having any contrast between the objects on your dashboard, because if you shade something, two colors that are the same will actually look very, very different. There's a lot of information out there on that. So in terms of text, pretty straightforward here. Just in this visualization, we're looking at the discount rate, average sales, etc. by state. And what I did was we used conditional highlighting or coloring to show where it's below the state average, and we bold it where it's above, right? So it jumps out a little bit more. What you shouldn't do, generally speaking, is use uppercase. It's kind of hard to tease out, and you just look like your angry uncle on Facebook who types in all caps when he's mad about your choice on the political spectrum. Okay, so when we're talking about, let's see, number 7, talk about minimizing dashboard objects while maximizing actionable insights. That's a very buzzword-laden little nugget there, but dashboard real estate is priceless, right? So you want to be very sensitive to that. So in this particular, bad or not suboptimal example, I'm looking at sales across my customer segment and my regions, right? And then I'm looking at sales across my product categories and my customer segments, and then by container. And they're independent of each other. So again, typically speaking, these 3 objects would mean 3 separate queries. Tableau is always looking to, they have caching, and they try to share queries across different objects, and they're always making performance improvements, but still, as a rule of thumb, you want to be mindful of that, and that's going to greatly impact your performance. But mostly the efficacy and the appeal of this. These aren't interactive between these various elements of the dashboard, and it's kind of confusing, right? So here's perhaps a better example where I've taken all of these and combined them into a single view. Now, you might be saying, hey, Mike, you just said, don't visualize your Excel spreadsheets, and I would agree with you in that what you might actually want to do with this is, if I'll jump out to the sheet here real quick and then jump out of presentation mode, I would consider doing this. And then you have a pure heat map. Again, you don't need these labels, but you're immediately drawn to the dark green and the dark red, and my good old friends, the tooltips are there. But what's beautiful about this is that you can also see, got a nice heat map that looks across my product categories, my product containers, my regions. It's even, drillable, so I can use some of those hierarchies and expand this out. I get a lot of insight out of this particular dashboard. Okay, and I've combined it all into a single query, really, to my data source. All right, so minimize dashboard objects. Pixels are precious in dashboards, and also Tableau 10 does a nice job of the Tableau 10 introduced device-specific layouts. So that was a challenge before, is if you had iPhone users or iPad users, you always had to consider that, and you have to be very careful of that. So Tableau 10 introduces device-specific layouts, so that's something, again, we can help you with, and it's a real nice way of helping to make your dashboards much more usable. So let's talk about 3 different types of navigation here. So one that's really nice here, and I'm gonna sort of reset this thing. Come on. All right, so my starting point for this dashboard, and this is where we use Tableau Actions, and these are great. right? So in Tableau Actions, I have a dashboard here where I'm looking again at my sales and the growth percentages across my regions and my customer segments. And what I can do here to, again, increase the efficacy and reduce the load on my data sources is instead of just automatically populating these, I use an action. So I go in here and I say, okay, well, you know, Central isn't looking so great. Let's drill in on that. And what happens is I've set an action to on click, it populates this, which drills into my central region. Again, I've got drill up, drill down capabilities, and then I have an action on hover that will then look at the details for zip code, in this case 62560. And as I hover over these things, this changes. So there's a lot of different kinds of actions you can use here, and you want to kind of decide when to use those based upon, you know, your user's needs and how that works. I'm not the biggest fan of the on hover because look what happens. If I want to go look at this guy, it doesn't really get pinned. It only works on the hover, but it is another option. Another thing is when you're using something like a heat map here, this heat map example, if I want to drill in on a particular one, I can set my action to have a menu of options. So when I click on this, you'll see I get these menu options where I can drill into, depending on who I am, I can drill into a customer. Now I go back here and I'm in my customer detail report, and if I'm interested in looking at something different, I can drill into product or drill into time. You get the idea. By using these URL actions, I can drill out, I can pass a set of product information to my product site and pull up that product on my site, or drill into another system, or just have a different view of the data. This dashboard becomes much more useful by virtue of the fact that I can go to a number of different places within the same dashboard. Okay, let's talk now about some things you should almost never do. The first big one is, and you see this a lot in kind of newspaper graphics and things like that. We see, and the winner is, you know, between me and my competitor. At first glimpse, it looks like I'm really smoking my competitor here. But though the astute and the observant among you will notice that if I look at my scale, we have 99.1 to 99.5. I'm really not beating my competitor by much at all. It's really kind of a coin toss at this point. So what you really should be doing is always show your zero access, in which case this provides a much more honest look at my information. So be very careful when you're using contextual filters and things of that nature that you're not distorting reality. Now the converse of that is, this is a process visualization where if I'm looking at my actuals, my targets, average, standard deviation, 5 different measures, and they're all very tight because this process manufacturing, it's a cement manufacturing. I have a pull level where beyond a certain level of quality, I can't ship this product and I need to pull it. So instead, what I want to do is I'm going to edit the axis here and I'm going to remove the zero axis. Because otherwise this visualization is completely useless, right? So here you want to clearly show the axis, and then by eliminating the zero axis, this again becomes useful, and I can see that I've got you know, batch 8 and 9 here, and 22 and 23 aren't passing muster. Okay, so again, avoid distortions of reality. You'll hear the phrase, friends don't let friends use pie charts. If you read Stephen Few, I'll talk a little bit about him later. In most situations, there is a better option than pie charts, right? All right, so 2 fundamental guiding principles for all dashboards. And let's see, so we want to talk a little bit about, Edward Tufte talks about the data to ink ratio. And here is a chart that shows my orders over time, and I've used a filled bar chart. Now, in the days where you'd print this out, this would have used a tremendous amount of ink, and your pages would have been all warped. It doesn't give you that much more information, and it takes up a lot of pixels, and it's not that helpful. Consider perhaps using this, or I would even say something more like our regional one where we used the regions on colors, and they were all represented on the same axis. right? Bubble charts, same way. Typically, it's hard to ascertain what's going on in here. It's hard to do a comparison. I know that Polycom and Riverside Palo Royale are bigger, but how much bigger are they? I have to go look at the data. Consider a scatter plot instead. And again, you can do more than just put the scatter plot out here. I can use sides, I can use color, I can use shapes to provide even more information. Likewise, word clouds tend to be, I know they're really popular, and in some cases they're interesting, but it's hard to do comparisons, much like bubble charts. And then when you use a black background and you tend to use a lot of ink versus your data. Consider instead, I had geographic information on there, use a map. This is much more illustrative and much more familiar to many people. So Edward Tufte would absolutely cringe at this high use of ink versus the amount of data that's on the screen. So consider your data to ink ratio when you're putting information on your dashboards. Okay, so pulling it all together, look and feel is very important. So 7 tips for a look and feel standard. Have a master template. This is really important in Tableau because again, its greatest strength is potentially its greatest weakness. Your metadata, everything is in the context of the workbook. Unless you have a visualization center of excellence or a center of excellence, whatever you call it, and enforce using master templates, using consistent data sources, you're going to have problems. Keep that template current so that it adjusts to changes in your business, changes in your corporate logos, your color schemes, whatever that is. Enforce its use through that COE, through executive sponsorship. Put your driver in the upper left, as I mentioned. Be kind to your colorblind friends. Always consider performance and design screen resolution for your user. Those of you on Tableau 9, it's a little trickier. You have to use different dashboards typically for that, or kind of entrust Tableau with its automatic stuff, and that leads to some kind of questionable results. Tableau 10 does ameliorate that to an extent. This is an example of a template you might show. Right, so you have your master title, you have your logo, you have your driver indicating to the author they should use this, replace with sheet 2. You have some of your disclaimers in here. Here's a 4-widget dashboard sample, a 6-widget, and then again, here's a sample dashboard here that we've built using our template. It has some nice instructions. It's interactive where wherever I click on this, it's going to drive to the detail for the particular item that I've chosen. Okay, so those are great examples of some templates. So I'd like to point you now to some additional visualization resources. So as you go down this journey, this is really kind of a 101 course, if you will, and I've jammed a lot in here. Hopefully it was useful to you, but the first and foremost, a lot of this, I've lifted a lot of material, or borrowed, I should say, from our own John Peterson, Information Dashboard Design and Science. Jim Fraser mentioned earlier the plethora of information that is out there on the Centurus website under resources, centurus.com/resources. Look this one up. It's great. It drills into some of the more of the pre-attentive stuff and the science behind dashboards. Edward Tufte should be the first place you'd stop with his visual display of quantitative information. Stephen Few, Nathan Yao, Andy Kirk. New York Times has some great infographics under this link. And of course, Kaplan and Norton with their balanced scorecards. So in summary, and to wrap this up and bring it home, I know we're getting up here towards the top of the hour. We want to have some time for Q&A. The best dashboards, I've said it probably 10 times here, and sorry for trying to beat this into your heads, but the best dashboard is the one that provides insight and is indispensable to your end users. Literally use your instincts. You have this massive portion of your brain dedicated to the processing of visual information. Be visual. Don't replicate your Excel spreadsheets. Take pains to make your dashboard simple. If you can't put it in front of your users without a big training manual, without a big tutorial, then you need to go back and make it simpler. Recall those quotes I used earlier. It's hard to make something simple. Take the pain up front, make the effort up front, and you will be rewarded in adoption and be a hero in your organization. Performance is always, always, always critical. Start with your business drivers and questions. What are the decisions that are going to be made with this dashboard? What are the trends we want to look at? How do we want to compare this thing to last year, to industry standards, to benchmarks, to regulatory requirements, whatever. Make sure you're starting with that and never lose focus on that. And to that end, iterate rapidly with your end users. Move away from the huck it over the fence IT brokered chasm between business and IT. The tools nowadays let you do this, and Tableau is particularly good at this. And then create a visualization center of excellence or center of excellence that imparts best practices, leverages best practices, creates best practices, introduces process, gives you the right technology, and provides education. And oh, by the way, that's a picture of our little Centurus guy that has the combination. He's the superhero nerd that has his little logo on his shirt and is carrying around his computer and a palette at the same time. They're part nerd, part scientist, part artiste, and part superhero. We do this all day, every day. We get out of bed seeking to help people answer their analytics questions and solve their analytics problems. Give us a call. We can help you with any and all of that. And with that, I'm going to jump back to our presentation and give it back to you, Jim, for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Mike. That was awesome. Boy, you were flying through a lot of great material covered there. And thanks for going through that with us. We've got a number of good questions coming in too that we're going to address here during the Q&A. And again, I know we have a lot of people out there today. Some of you may have not this may be your first webinar with Centurus, so please chat us or in the question pane, submit questions here for Mike you have on any of the content that he was talking about and things that you want to ask around dashboard design, and then Mike's going to go through that with us in just a second here. So real quick, just some other resources from Centurus that loop into what we're talking about today. I want to introduce to you a package service offering that we think might be applicable to some of you on the line. We have a Tableau server optimization assessment that we offer as a package service. This engagement is geared either towards people who have deployed Tableau server and may not be realizing the full potential of it, or they've run into roadblocks, or for those considering Tableau server and want to take the content they've been developing on desktop and put it out to a much larger group of people, and you want to prepare yourselves for success. You can see on the slide the overview of the tasks that we perform, which are basically assessing the different layers of your BI stack, kind of relating back to some of the challenges we heard people bring up earlier today about how do we prepare that data, how do we prepare our resources. The final deliverable is a findings and recommendations document that can either point out the causes and potential solutions to issues you might have with your current deployment, or make recommendations around the setup and architecture for your planned deployment to make sure that you're set for success. The cost is $2,995, and Centurus offers a money-back guarantee on your results. Next, I'd like to jump to our training. A lot of that was like the second item on the list earlier today, is about having the expertise in the organization. Centurus has developed our own training curriculum, which is a little bit different from what you may have seen in the market. We offer a graduated curriculum which is instructor-led with hands-on exercises. In fact, I saw a bunch of questions coming in as Mike was talking that specific topics we cover in our fundamentals class around Tableau. We seek to minimize the time out of the office by offering a half-day fundamentals class, which is different. I don't think there's a lot of that being offered out there, followed by a one-day intermediate and then a two-day advanced class. To understand the details, please visit the training tab on our website, select choosing a Tableau class, and I'll tell you, we've received overwhelming feedback that our half-day fundamentals class bridges the gap for new Tableau users that previously either had to rely on recorded webinars or otherwise devote 2 full days out of the office, and people have been really excited about it. I'd like to call your attention to some upcoming events. As I said, we do these webinars typically every 2 to 3 weeks, so if you're new to our series here, please get, well, now you're in our database, but we'll let you know, and please get on the plan here for upcoming events. On Thursday, December 8th, we're going to host the Northern California Cognos User Group in Pleasanton, California, and the focus there will be bringing the content from the recent IBM World of Watson conference back to the Bay Area. On Thursday, December 15th, we'll host a webinar discussing what's new in Cognos Analytics Release 5, and you can register for both of these events on our events page. And then finally, we talked about this before, but please visit our resources page where you're going to find recordings of today's webinar in about a week and all the webinars that we conduct. We've got a wonderful library of hundreds of recordings focused on various topics related to business analytics. These include architectural topics such as why do I need a data lake, or very specific tool-based topics such as how do I do advanced calculations in Tableau, to business-focused topics such as the holy grail of marketing analytics. All of these resources are free for you to download and leverage. And now I'd like to pop back to Mike here. I know we're on the edge of our time. Mike, are there some questions that you saw over there that you want to address?
Yeah, I saw this. So I turn my video on there for a second. I saw a couple questions here. You were talking about layout containers. What's the best practice for working with layout containers when starting to design a dashboard? So yeah, layout containers are interesting in that that's really how you go and you can introduce space in between your either worksheet objects and your non-worksheet objects. So dashboards consist of worksheet objects, which are obviously worksheets, non-worksheet objects, which are images, space, web pages, things like that. And then those fall within layout containers that allow you to kind of group objects, create space, and lay things out. And that's where, again, really the more you get into the worksheet design is important. The dashboard design becomes even more of an art versus a science, net of some of the recommendations that we make there. And what you end up doing, I always tell people, I start with tiled and snap things into the grid, right? I get the key drivers in there, and then again, you want to iterate, sort of test this out with your users. And then what Tableau does when you bring things in, it brings all the legends in, it brings your quick filters or filters, whatever you want to call them. I call them prompts, brings them over. I like to put all my prompts in one place, usually kind of over on the right, or some people like them across the top if you can sort of minimize them. And again, make sure they're not taking up all your real estate. Use drop downs, use type-ins, things like that to minimize the real estate. And then you change some of them to floating to drop things in and put legends with their respective worksheets, and so they're intuitively obvious, and again free up that all-important real estate. So once you get into that, it's really, okay, what do my users want? What do they like? What's my device? Do I have a 4K screen, or is somebody looking at this on an iPhone? That's really going to drive a lot of what you can get on there and how you design that. Again, Tableau 10 has some nice device-specific layout capabilities, so definitely that's almost a reason in and of itself to move to Tableau 10 if you haven't, from a deployment perspective. But that's again, we can help you with that. We design these dashboards for all levels of users, from executives down to down to line level employees and stuff like that. We can help you with that. And then conditional highlighting, someone asked about. So conditional highlighting, I'm probably guilty of using a throwback perhaps to my Cognos days or my SAP days. Conditional highlighting is really when you would and it's in Excel too, obviously, when you create a formula and you say, okay, if my profit is greater than 10%, it's green. If it's between 0 and 10, it's yellow, and below zero, it's red. So that's what I mean by conditional highlighting. In Tableau, you can do the same thing. You just basically create the formula. Either Tableau will create it automatically for me, it'll create that gradient for things like for numeric items, for measures, or if you want to sort of define what those buckets are, you can create calculations in Tableau, and then you drag them, for example, out on the color mark or the shape mark, or use a mark type to delineate between those things, and that's another form of conditional highlighting. So conditional highlighting can take on many different forms. The New York Times link, Brittany, you had asked about that in the chat. We will, I believe, update. It's my fault. I always kind of update my decks right up until showtime. So I'm getting our folks the latest one, and I believe they'll get that up on the site. If not, you can always reach out to me, and I'll get you that link. I know it's rather lengthy. So that's all I'm seeing in the question window. I either bombarded you with so much information that I stunned you into silence, or answered all your questions. By all means, we would love to hear from you, so please reach out to us. This last slide here shows it's our website address, has our email, it's got my email. We love hearing from you guys. I promise we won't give you the hard sell. If you happen to have a project or something for us or some kind of need, we'd love to talk to you about it. And if you have any questions or anything from this, feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. So with that, unless there are any other questions, Jim, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to close with, or I think we can turn our audience loose.
Yep. No, I think we're set. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Great. Yeah, thank you, everybody. It's been great having you online here, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a great day.